Paper is the number one material that either makes or breaks your art. I'll show you how a non-cotton watercolor paper versus a 100% cotton watercolor paper behaves. And I'll even give you a third option that will knock your socks off, at least for practice. Here are two papers commercially designed for watercolor. This is a 190-gram paper that's called a watercolor paper, but it's not a cotton paper. So when I apply water to it with my brush, like that, I'll do it exactly the same way on the cotton paper. And I've reloaded just like on the other one. Now let's have a closer look. Look, there's drips and puddles, whereas this one has been more absorbent with less water running around. Let's plonk a little bit of pigment there and there and watch how they disperse. They disperse differently. Here the water has pushed the pigment right out to the edges and left a big halo there with a darker halo around the sides. Here it's different. Now, what if I was to take some thicker paint and add another drop in there? Let's see how they disperse. Watch closely as I've sped it up. This one is a lot more uneven. This one is more even. If I go onto dry paper and do that, and here I'll do the same thing. Notice how in the cheaper paper it's piled up on one side, whereas here it's much more even. When you're painting, all these things add up, and you'd be surprised how difficult it can make your job of painting to be. Now, when the water is more absorbed, I'm going to show you something else. But we do have to wait a minute. Washing my brush. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of water, just a drop, and plonk it down in the middle of this. Now here I have purposely created what's called a bloom or a cauliflower, but let's just see how they behave. I'm sorry that there's glare on the cotton side, but as you can see, misbehaving is happening on the non-cotton side. Firstly, the cheaper paper isn't as flat as the cotton paper. It's rolled around everywhere. The cotton paper is more predictable because it's doing what we wanted it to do, just to make a little cauliflower in the middle. And here are the two samples fully dry. They were painted exactly the same way, and look how different they are. We all love watercolor spontaneity, but this is too much. This is only the start of problems with non-cotton paper. They peel, they break through, can't lift off them. Anyway, and now for a surprising third option. This is a clip from my YouTube video about this third option and other paper. This black one is my favorite. It's the Signature Visual Art Diary premium drawing paper and made of 100% wood pulp. It certainly doesn't say anything about watercolor, but it has a certain texture and feel about it, and the way it handles, I'm really liking it. The brand also has some watercolor papers that I don't like. I like this sketchbook better. So it really is a matter of trying and seeing for yourself. But because I'm not expecting anything from this paper, I'm not treating it like watercolor paper, it's not really watercolor, but it does allow me to practice what I need to. There's a big difference in that. I would never be able to practice all these birds on real watercolor paper. It would cost me a fortune. I'd have to leave home. There's a lot more in this video, and the link's up here in the corner. Okay, now I'm going to perform the exact same experiment I did earlier on the non-cotton and cotton paper in the sketchbook. Let's see what happens. I've wet the paper twice only because I did the very same to the other two. Otherwise, wetting all the papers only once would have been sufficient, but we have to keep the variables the same. The paper is obviously a lot more rippled because it's much thinner, only 110 GSM, but there are 120 pages in the sketchbook. The paint in the top section is spreading considerably slower than on the non-cotton paper. I've just added some richer pigment to the center. The fact is that papers like this don't need as much water. I'm just waiting for a little bit of the sheen to go away from the center before I add a little droplet of water. There is a little bit of pooling happening. This is because the paper is on a flat surface. And when it's rippled and on a flat surface, you will get little pools of water. I'm going to add a little droplet of water over here. So it's just about dry now, not completely. As you can see, the paper has flattened out considerably and it hasn't spread completely out of control. So today I've used this watercolor pad by Montmartre, which is 180 GSM. I said 190 before, my apologies. It says it's a watercolor paper, but I don't recommend it. Then we've used the Montmartre Cotton Watercolor Paper Premium, which is 100% cotton, 300 GSM, and it performs really well. Comes in a pack of 5. And then finally, I used the Visual Art Diary, which performed like this, and in my opinion, it's a real winner for just practice. Let's have a look at what happens when we paint on them. I'm going to tilt my paper a little bit because it's always better, and make a nice big pool of some burnt sienna and paint across the paper. This first paper here is the wood pulp paper. Now I'm going to paint on ashes. You can see that the application is smoother, but my brush seems to be traveling slower because it's absorbing more of the paint. Whereas on the wood pulp one, my brush was kind of gliding across the sleeker paper. Now let's quickly going to drop in some cobalt blue, just a little bit thicker, just a little squiggle of a line, and see what happens. They look a little bit different too. Now maybe just a droplet of water, and we'll see how that behaves. Then I'm going to get some staining color, which is our phthalo blue. Just make another little snake on the other side, and then we'll come back to them. The wood pulp paper is buckling a little bit, and you can see that some of the paint is pooling in the valleys, whereas the cotton one is beautifully flat. When there's a stroke being made on one paper and the same kind of stroke on another paper and they turn out different, you really have to ask yourself, why would you even bother with the first one? My paper is dry, and now I'm going to attempt to do some lifting. So I've washed my brush, just tapped out so it's not dripping, and I'll try this side first. Well, that lifted quite well. That's the wood pulp side. And that wasn't too bad either. But as you can see, the background, we painted them both the same way. The wood pulp one is much more uneven, and the cotton one is a lot more even. Okay, I'll go now onto this side, and that has lifted really well. A little bit of lifting for the phthalo. I should have actually counted my passes. With wood pulp paper in particular, it's very easy if you can't get rid of something that the paper starts to pill. If I go over this one again, the paper is starting to peel a little bit. Watercolour isn't the easiest medium to work with, so why would we make it more difficult than it has to be? Every aspect of watercolour is like a tug-of-war between simplicity and science. So why make it even more difficult by using paper that actually hinders your growth? For fastest improvement and steady growth, use only 100% cotton watercolor paper, 300 GSM, and a simple sketchbook for practicing strokes and whatnot. You can buy cotton paper in bulk in packs of 10, making it very cost effective, and you can cut them up, and you'll also have lots of paper on hand and not feel intimidated by just having one sheet. So it's onwards and upwards.